All right, the budget workshop is now open. Dr. Phillips, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Good to see everyone. We're going to hand out some things to you. All of this will be posted online. We'll try to get it posted online first thing in the morning, which is our typical process, so the public can have access to this as well. But you'll be able to point folks to that, to those documents. Talk a little bit about the budget in general. I know we've got some members that are new. This is the first time through. Some have been through it a number of times, and so I do want to give a little bit of context around some things that we may typically in previous years not talk about a lot, because you guys already know that and familiar with it, but I do want to make sure that I mention it this year just so we kind of hopefully help with the newer folks knowing kind of where the funding sources are and those types of things, because it may be a question that you have, and we'll just try to address that up front. Obviously, we've given you a consolidated budget that includes general purpose. As you flip through this, you'll see that there's some blue page breaks that separate general purpose from federal, school nutrition, and then two others, the technology, Brown technology budget, and then also the Duke estate endowment budget. And those have been around. Obviously, Mr. Brown's will left us the funds for the Brown Technology Fund, and then the Duke estate was around before I arrived. And it's both of those very specific about what they can be used for and how we've used them in the past, but that's what's included in this document. And then we went ahead, I think, and Trevor passed out the PowerPoint that I'm going to go through. We have tried over time to continue with a similar format, a little bit for ease, to kind of take a complex, complicated budget and kind of get narrowed down to what I think you all over time have wanted to know. Certainly we want to answer questions, and if you don't have them tonight, but then you think of them and you want to email those to me, I'll try to get you an answer for whatever the question is. We'll try to get you a response back. If it's something that's technical or complicated in the sense that it's not as easy as just an email response, then we may give you a call and just talk to you about it, okay? Funding sources. So you really have three funding sources. You have the state, you have our local funding, which is really made up of three things: property tax being the largest, sales tax, and wheel tax when you buy your car tag. And those are the three local sources of funding. And then, of course, you have some federal funding. Most of that flows through the things that you think of with title and IDEA flow through the federal budget, which is part of what's here, and not necessarily in general purpose, unless general purpose is picking up expenses to help cover services that we provide out in the school, and that is the case. A little bit of history and kind of also a little bit of the law. We will present the budget obviously here to you. We will ask you to approve the budget. We have typically been around the May time frame. Some years when I first arrived it was later, but we try to do that in May so we can get that to the county. The county, I think, has already set a budget meeting for the school board for June the 5th, if my information was correct. And then I don't know whether they will address the school budget in their June meeting or not. I would assume that they would, but certainly they could choose to either do that or not do that. From the perspective of what happens if they don't, let's talk about that a second. If it passes the school board and it goes to the county, and the county doesn't pass it, they have certainly the authority to do that. We would go on a continuation budget. A continuation budget is triggered by law. If you do not have a budget passed by July 1st, you would go under continuation budget. Continuation budget Used to be very common here. We would go probably most years on continuation budget. That basically means that you're going to continue to operate, but you will operate under the previous year's 1/12 of the previous year's allocation. And so you could do that if the budget is not passed at the county by July 1st. And there are resolutions that they would pass to do that. Like I said, that used to happen and occur pretty regularly. I don't know if it will or not this year. But for the new ones, that's kind of how that works. The law is pretty clear that if you do not have a budget approved by September 1st, you cannot expend funds. So I tell you that just so everyone understands that if a budget is not approved by September 1st, school will not operate. You cannot pay employees. Certainly hope that's not the case. Pray that's not the case. But that is part of what is in the law that could be triggered if a budget is not passed locally by September 1st. Maintenance of effort. Maintenance of effort is a requirement by law, and I think that's been talked about. I know I've answered a couple of questions about it earlier in the year, and I know there's been some communication with the state. And, they've actually this year clarified, I say clarified, the law's been the same for a long time, but they actually put maintenance of effort on our actual funding sheet. In the past, you just had to look at the previous year's budget. It's pretty simple in the sense that whatever was previously allocated in the approved budget for the prior year for total revenue from the county, it cannot go down. It doesn't have to go up, but it can't go down. So what we have set as maintenance of effort is being confirmed by the state as what you'll see as total local revenue, and we'll go through that in just a minute and you'll see it. Obviously, with any budget, for us, we're a labor-driven business and we love our employees. They do a great job. And we're going to go through here in a moment some information about pay. Pay and benefits always kind of drive the biggest portion of cost for us, and that's going to continue to be the case for forever, because that's kind of how our business model is set up. So we talk about pay and benefits as the front end of a new expenditure, because any increase you have in pay and benefits will be a recurring expense that you will need to plan for in future years. And then there are other things that we'll discuss as we go through it. But I kind of want to give everybody a little update about timeline and kind of what the law says and kind of what we're planning on, and hoping and praying that our county commission will approve our budget, and we'll be off to the races. I've got a PowerPoint, and I think you have that. We'll go on and start with that. A lot of this, and if you've been on the board or haven't been on the board, but you've been engaged with us, you'll notice that a number of these things kind of, especially format, have kind of stayed the same, especially our mission and kind of what we try to do each year with the budget. So our mission: Sumner County Schools commits to growing learners who are college and career ready through quality instruction, effective use of resources, building a collaborative culture, and strong leadership. And I think we've done a good job with that. Budget goals: always looking to increase efficiency and effectiveness throughout the system, expand opportunities for students, and then drive as many resources as we can to the local school and to the classroom. Budget process is really just a timeline. We start meeting with principals in February, and we meet with every principal, and then we usually get through with that prior to spring break, try to be done by March 1st. Then I start meeting with department heads to discuss the needs of each department, and then in April we do cabinet level, direct reports to me, other than principals. Then obviously we put in here May 16th, that's a known date to us, that's today, and then next week. And then we did put TBD because we do believe that the county has called or will call a meeting for June the 5th to hear our budget, and we'll be over there presenting it to them. And then, like I said, I don't know if they'll take it up in June at the regular meeting or not, but we left TBD, but that would be the process that we would go through. We always cover revenue first and then expenditures probably in a little more detail. But if you look, you will see that the revenue side of our equation this year, financials, state funding, the new TISA formula, will generate more revenue for us. I think it will generate more revenue for every school district in the state. It depended on your student's calculation for base student plus unique learning need that was part of the TISA formula, how much you would generate in additional income. But I think you can see from our perspective, TISA and the passing of TISA was good to generate revenue for our local system. In years past, we have seen BEP 1 year of my 12, now 12, 13 budgets. We didn't have a budget when I arrived here. We had to get one together, but some of you remember those days back in, gosh, 12 years ago. It was really my 13th budget here, but I think 1 year of that cycle, we had BP that was pretty flat. But all the other years, it has varied between $2 million addition to $9 or $10 million. We usually were around $4 or $5 million, usually on a year-over-year dollar increase. And most of that was always geared toward salary increases. So when the governor would say we're going to increase teacher pay by X% or those types of things, it would never cover that, which we always talked about, but because the old formula of BEP did not cover all of the staff, certified staff, that the law required us to have by ratios. So it was kind of weird. But long story short, the state funding mechanism, TISA, will generate us, just in TISA funds, about a little over $31 million more in revenue this year. If you'll look in your book, all of you have your blue book. If you'll look, because it's a big thing, but if you'll look, you'll kind of see on that very first page, as soon as you open it up, you will see that the first line, that $126,405,220, that's the maintenance of effort that I was talking about. And if you look over there, you'll see the comparison from year to year, zero. We left that at zero because I think, Mr. Lawing had indicated he felt like that's what the county was going to do, was to give us maintenance of effort, which is that dollar amount that's required by law. If you look a little further down, you'll see state of Tennessee, and you'll see this year we were at $167,786,000, and next year will be just under $200 million. So that's where that $31 million difference. You see 31,702 there because the state, other than TISA, there are a few other things that get calculated into that. You can find those on page 6. If you look on page 6, down at the bottom, state of Tennessee, you will see the state of Tennessee funds that they send us. Not all of it is in TISA. Some of it is in those other lines that you will see. Other state funds, career ladder, you guys see those? But that's where you see that total number, and so you see the TISA number there, 31,411,997. If you look also on page, let me see, hold on just a second. If you look on page 5, Page 5, under local taxes, you will see property tax. You'll see a lot of numbers there with trustee and everything else, but the ones to focus on are the first line, county property tax. You will see down under line 40200, sales tax, and then right below that, wheel tax. You see those? So those are the three big items as far as the revenue stream from the local county, and we've placed 0 out there beside them because, like I said, they all total up to that dollar amount, 126,452.20, which is maintenance of effort, and that's what we believe will be the case at the county for this coming year. I will say this too, for some of you that may not know, 2 things. One, property tax and sales tax, we get about 66%, 2/3 of the revenue collected goes to the school district from those sources. And then we get 70% of the wheel tax. Used to be 100%, but then a change was made and it's 70%. In total budget, excluding capital, now don't get confused, because capital expenditures that are considered debt, school buildings that are built, that are incurred by the county to build schools, I'm not referencing that debt load, okay? So I don't want anybody to misunderstand my statement. But when I arrived, that total penny allocation that was at the county at that time, we would generate about 67% of that total allocation. And now that has moved, the property values and the allocation has increased, obviously, but that percentage has shrunk over that time. So now it's probably closer to 61, 62% of the total. And so just so you know, that's kind of how that has trended over time. In past years, if you know, David Lawing has done a good job, great job. I love David to death, but he's been very conservative, which is the right thing to do. We have been, and he has been. So when you look every year at projecting forward for property taxes, new property, and sales tax, right? We have always been conservative in collectability with property taxes, and then taxes on new property that will come onto the tax roll to be collected for this next fiscal year. With that being said, which is the right way to do it, as you generate revenue throughout the year locally, if you do that conservatively, you're going to generate more revenue than what you budgeted, right? So those tax allocation in the pennies will make a difference. And I'm just telling you guys, you probably, as they pass resolutions at the county to allocate pennies, you know, you probably want to see how that's going to impact year over year if they just continue to fund the exact dollar amount. Does that make sense? Because those pennies, if they're left the same, you will get the benefit of increased sales tax and wheel tax and property tax. So people that build new houses and buy new houses and they come on the property roll, those, if they give you the exact same dollar amount, you will not see any of those dollars. Does that make sense? Am I clear about that? And that's just something to watch for. Certainly is their prerogative to either give you the exact dollar amount or leave the pennies the same in the current allocation. They can make that decision, and they will, but that's something that you probably year over year will want to make sure you focus on. One thing that Amanda does that she does, they do a great job. If you look and you're going through this budget after tonight, look on page 34. Find page 34 for me. And look, we do something here that we try to make this, this is to help not only you and us, but also to help with anyone else that's looking at our budget. You see those budget notes? Okay. Those budget notes are going to tie back in reference to what line the budget you're looking at. So if you want to know what that property tax collection that I just explained, if you will look on page 34 under local sales tax, for an example, you will see what that means. Does that make sense? So it's just a way for, sometimes people look through the budget and then they have a question, and if you look on page 34 or any of the corresponding pages past that and find that budget line, it should help with some explanation. Not that it will give you the exact answer you're looking for, but it may help a little bit with that, okay? All right, back to the PowerPoint. State other revenue changes, state LEAPs and federal CEIS funding was a little bit of an increase. Community Health Family Resource Center, they rolled some things that were previously state grants, where we would always have to pass amendments for state grants, okay? They have rolled a lot of that into TISA. So it kind of goes away, and they've included that in the TISA calculation for base student numbers. So you should see, I say should see, I mean they could start back and add them every year as a grant, but hopefully under TISA they will add, if they want to add dollars, the state would add dollars in the base allocation. Does that make sense? So you would say, okay, well, we're going to give something that would equate to $5 a student for every student in the state for a specific thing. It may not be necessarily grant funded. They would just say, okay, well, we're going to go on a base calculation from 6860 to 6865. And that's how you would get your money. So there's been some consolidation of some of those grants, Save Schools, Family Resource Center, some of those things into TISA. So you'll see a little bit of a shift this year, and then how they handle that moving forward might be a little different. So you see we got a little over 32.5 million, which I think as far as a year over year by a long stretch, that's the most that we've had in one single year. From any budget source or consolidated budget sources for increased revenue. Mr. Daniels?
Yeah, just a couple questions real quick. So based on this budget summary and what you've presented, the revenue changes shown here all comes from state funding, not any additional local funding, correct?
It's all state funding.
My second question is,
and one thing to note too, there's, people ask me sometimes, well, and you guys have probably heard me reference this. They say, well, why didn't you call the state and scream at them about certain things and this and that over time, and I always try to tell them, well, they are still funding the vast majority of the cost for our schools. And that gap has probably widened now that we have TISA, because they're putting $32 million more into the school district locally, and then we're expecting our local to stay the same. So that is a good point, and something I think that you should be aware of, and other people should be aware of too. They're going to be right at $200 million coming from the state to fund our schools next year, and we anticipate the local contribution will be 126.
well, and I guess that my question is, in looking back at the other numbers, that 31 million is a pretty significant increase over previous years. When we look towards the next budget year, would we anticipate that this 31 million probably cycles back closer to what it previously is? I mean, obviously, as we add additional students and we add additional staff, I think we've got 2 new schools that we're looking to open over the next couple of years, so that will add to the funding provided by the state. But I would anticipate that next year we're not going to see a $31 million number here.
Yeah.
It's probably more in line with previous years in the $2, $3, $4, $5, $6 million area from an increase standpoint.
Yeah. So from a budgeting perspective, obviously we have tried to be conservative over time, and with that, you will want to make sure that you make recurring budget decisions that give you an opportunity to look further than just today, because this is a business that you're operating, and I think we've done a phenomenal job, and so you're financially very sound. But that doesn't mean that you can make some bad decisions that are recurring expenditures. And I say bad in the sense that it overcommits you And then in 2 or 3 years, if all of those cycle of recurring revenue stay the same, then you would obviously have your business in trouble. And so I think you just need to be mindful of that. I would, to directly answer your question, say that I don't anticipate the state ever coming forward with this type of funding again. I would say that they will probably raise the base allocation, but at the same time, they will allocate you by state law. They will mandate you by state law to spend more dollars than they send. Does that make sense? So they're going to say, we're going to raise the base allocation from 6860 to 6960, but we're going to require you to do these 3 things that will cost you more than your total increase from the state. Because that's what's going to happen. I'm just telling you now. You can write that down, and I'm not being ugly to the state. I think Representative Lambert and Representative Garrett and Senator Hale, they all do a marvelous job for us. Very supportive, and obviously that's here. You see it with $31 million coming to us from the change from DEP to TISA. But I just know that that's typically, they want to make sure that the local is paying their portion of any kind of increase. And so I think that would be something that you would need to be mindful of. I don't anticipate there will be huge jumps in the future like this one or anywhere close to it. Typically, a while ago when I was talking about, just a minute ago, about being conservative in David at the county, and making sure you kind of understand pennies and how that's generated and what that means. Every year in the past, when we would pass the resolution at the county and they would set the budget and the pennies of allocation and how the pennies were split up to generate each entity, sheriff, highway, us, generate revenue to cover our budget, because of the conservative nature of the conservative nature of how we've kind of always tried to be conservative about projecting sales tax increases and those types of things. You would always generate $4 to $5 million probably in a typical year more than what you actually from a total dollar amount requested. So you just want to kind of pay attention to that a little bit moving forward. All right, let's go to revenue, from revenue to expenditures. Obviously, we do deal with pay first and talk about pay and how we're going to do that and try to move forward with employee pay. So I think I've got some stuff here I'm going to hand out, and this is going to be a little more historical. Can y'all help me? Will y'all pass those out? So you're going to get 4 different things here, two different sets of things that look just alike. For those of you that have seen this, you know, but we have, it's good to kind of get a little bit of history about the pay situation, and I'm going to show you a slide in a second that references that. It's in your PowerPoint. But also going to make sure that you have this in front of you so you can kind of see what we're talking about in regard to pay with raises and steps, because that's a little bit unique to government and how we operate in the system. Yeah, it's 2 different years. 2 different years. Yeah, you're going to get 2 different years. Let me tell you what. Let me tell you what you're getting. You're getting 2 things of each. They're different years. So if you'll stay with me a second, I'm going to give you one example of how you can find how that pay change affects people, and it'll become clearer why I gave it to you. Okay, and you know, it just makes it a little bit easier to understand. But I have to give you a lot of pieces of paper to do that. All right, so on your screen, I'm going to go on and go through Let me go through a little bit right here real quick. If you look at your screen, and you can flip a few pages here on the other portion, what we're talking about doing with, and this is kind of a history, if you look on the screen, this is kind of a history of where we've been with, on the certified side of salary increases year over year. And so from 12-13 forward, everyone that's certified's been given a raise. Of course, obviously, the last several years where we have really made some big gains. You see that on the scale with starting teacher pay, but it was actually added across the board. We did two separate $4,000 raises. So when you look at that just from a starting teacher's perspective, you know, we've gone from 36.1 to this coming year 45.6. And so we've really and much deserved, we've made a big jump and big gain over the last several years in regard to teacher pay. But part of that $11,795,000 really boils down to this slide. Certified raises, we're saying go ahead and add $1,500 to the scale, so everyone would receive $1,500 wherever they're at on the scale. And then all classified employees, we did $1 a year last year. I mean, $1 an hour last year. And we Amanda and I kind of knew that was something that we wanted to do kind of part last year, part this year, similar to what we're doing on the certified side. And so the $1 an hour raise plus the step for classified employees. So that would raise the starting wage. You know, we just went to 11 last year. So that would raise the starting wage of the lowest on the pay curve to $12 an hour from 11. Still too low, but certainly moving in the right direction. I will say this too, as a point about that. I'm not sure if we got it on here or not. If you look, and this is one of the reasons I handed out all these sheets. If you will look at your 2022, 2023 certified scale. Can y'all get that? And get right beside it the 23, 24. So you'll have both of them like this. 22, 23, 23, 24. And what you'll notice, obviously, is that the 22, 23 0-year Tier 1 BS was 44.1, and of course it goes to 45.6. Do y'all see that? Bottom left number. What I wanted you to see, because sometimes if you're not in the system, you really don't understand, or you can't, you know, because it's a government thing, the step system that we have for employees as they're here multiple years and move through the system and stay with us. Then when we add to the scale or add $1 or add anything to base wage, they still get that step, right? So let's just take one example. If you have a master's degree and 17 years experience, a master's degree and 17 years experience on this current year's schedule, if you look, master's of 17 is 59,470. If you go to 23-24, a master's and 17, it's a little bit different. Let's see, I think I'm looking at the right thing. Yeah, like 15 was 57,983, it's 59,483. So you can kind of see how every year the step's a little bit different. But in actuality, and you can do that with, that's why we wanted to give these to you so you can look at it. And if you do the same thing on the classified scale, you'll see that. You know, if you take those sheets and you say, okay, well, what does that mean? Typically, a step would be about 2%. But some years it's more and some years it's less. But that is kind of how you read those and why I wanted to give them to you. So you didn't go out and have to hunt for them. I think they're online. But that's the reason I gave you those 4 pieces of paper, so you could reference that as you look at kind of understanding what does that mean when we're talking about giving $1,500 on the scale, but then also the step, or $1 an hour plus the step. So all of those costs, with the associated costs that go with it, step, raises, the entire thing for classified and certified is that $11,795,000 number that you see there on the first expenditure change. We also had some range increases. So range increases are a different category of where you fall on that classified sheet. So if your job is arranged 16 or 14 or 11 or 18 or 22, you can look across there at what range you are and then what step you're on, and then that would give you that hourly wage. Here are the staff classified range increases, and for those that have been around, you know this because we've done this numerous times to raise ranges of employees across the system. And so this is what we're looking at for this current year to propose for next year. That would be a range increase. So people that fall in these job categories would move on the sheet for next year. If the budget's approved, they would move to the new range and the step that they are would be in next year.
Good time for a question.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of questions. First, where is the governor's proposed new starting pay? Supposedly
Yep.
in a few years he's want us to be about at what level? At
So
what
it's a great question. When they passed TISA last year, they put in that with the funding that you're seeing, that 31 million, everyone needed to be at 45,000 by 2026, 26-27 school year. So we will already be above that. Now the new version that just passed this year was that they wanted the minimum pay to be 50. Now, what I would anticipate, Mr. Lancaster, is that if that comes to fruition, that base allocation from the state that I mentioned, that's going to float up each year to help the state's portion of getting that minimum salary to 50. Does that make sense?
Yes. So 50, is it still by 2026?
It's not yet. I don't think that's active yet. I think that's something that they have proposed that they would like to do.
And what is it currently? Like, what is the minimum currently? I guess, where are we in relation to the minimum? Are we minimum plus?
Last year when we did the last raise increase, can I get that to you? Because I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's changed. The state gives a minimum that you have to do, and we're well above that.
Right.
And have been, especially since we started the two $4,000 raises. But I would need to ask what is actually, because we weren't close to it, I don't think, so I would need to ask to make sure.
But
It's a
to a
good
certain
question.
extent, we got to figure out,
Yep, you got to figure out,
if everybody in the state's paying
yeah,
X, and we're right now X plus 3, then we got to.
That's right.
And the new X is going to be 50, then
Yep.
we got to be.
that's exactly right. And so as you're sitting here in the future, you're going to need to say, okay, well, we were going to have to get paid from 45.6, which we've come from 36.1 to 45.6 in the last basically 3-4 budget cycles. You're going to need to get to 50. That's wonderful. It's great. But you need to also figure out how that recurring cost is going to be. The state's not going to send you all of that. And so you're going to have to figure out, how to make that, how to make that work.
And the other question, last year, I call this the crayon slide, but whatever, the Crayola chart, we had a $4,000 increase and $1 per hour for classified, and it was like 18.6 was the expenditure increase. This year we're at $1,500 and $1 per hour, and we're at 12. What else was in that last year that I'm not thinking of? Because it
Probably-
seems like we should have had.
Probably last year we had a big jump in bus. We had some bus driver jump,
Okay.
and that was a big one. We also last year, yeah, we went up a good bit last year in bus drivers for sure, and maybe a couple of other categories. I'd have to look back and see, Mr. Lancaster. It's been,
Add positions because of what you as well.
yeah, oh yeah.
But that
Yeah,
was
we had.
that
yeah.
was a separate line.
I think it was a separate line item, yeah, because I split that out because I knew the board would ask
Yeah.
about
Because
it.
the positions that we're adding here are also on a separate line item. Or not.
We try to always break that out because we want you to see what the new spots are. Does that make sense? And we've done that every year. Yeah, 4,000 for certified last year instead of 1,500.
Right,
You're trying to back into the math.
Well, the correlation seems like, you know, we're 2/3 of what we were last year, but we're really only 1,500, you know, increase versus fourth. You would expect it to be
Half.
or less than half, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like,
Yeah.
and I know we had the bus driver increase, but I didn't know exactly how much that was.
Yeah, and I think there were some others too, but I need to look back and see. But I'm happy to get that for you. It should have been in last year's budget presentation. All right, so if you'll go to staffing, let's see. Let me back up here and see if I missed something. This is just a slide of the salary increase, and it's in your budget presentation as a slide. I always think that it's good just to see kind of a historical perspective for the last 10 or 12 years or so, kind of where we've been and what we've done each year. Some obviously more than others. And then this slide is always interesting a little bit because it you know, kind of lays out the total picture. Projected mandatory amount to remain in fund balance. So this is part of what the state requires school districts to do. They do not require city or county governments to do this, but it's not a bad thing. They just require you to put a percentage of your operating expenditures minus capital into a mandatory fund balance. And so you will not, if you do not have that set aside in your budget, they will not approve your budget. It's a calculation that's done once you put all your budget numbers into the state system. If you do not have the mandatory amount set aside to remain in fund balance, then they will not approve your budget. So our number this year is $16,632,000. As your budget increases, that number will increase also. You know, I remember when it was 9, 10, that kind of thing. We had requested amount that was assigned in fund balance was $27 million. Undesignated fund balance 37, total budget revenue of $330 million, budget expenditures 338. It's a difference of about $7.8 million. If you look back over time in these budget slides that are all online year over year over year, some of you may remember that I think this is the lowest number of actually difference between budgeted revenue and expenditure that we've had since I've been here, which is a good thing. You know, that means that your revenue and expenditures are very, very close together in regard to how much money you have coming in from a recurring revenue stream. Budgeted capital expenditures about $22 million, and then undesignated fund balance, obviously we're taking some of that for that $7.8 million, and then we're leaving unbudgeted a little over $7 million. We've built that up, you know, for those of us that have been around. I remember when it was $1. You know, and then we got to $1 million and $2 million and $3 million, and then this year we're proposing that you leave $7 over there that you could pull from if an emergency happened or a catastrophe or something like that. You could pull those funds and allocate them through your normal process here at the school district. Look, I'm going to go through a little bit of personnel. We do this every year just because I think it gives you some context and idea about new positions. And we're always, you know, when we meet with principals or department heads, cabinet level, obviously, as I said, you know, we've got a labor-driven business model. We have wonderful employees. And so each year when we meet, we have requests for positions, whether that's out at the school or in maintenance or operations or wherever across the district, and we take all of those and then try to work down to what we think is appropriate. And we always start with the schools. And so we try and have, since my time here, it's a process that we go through with principals, and they know before they come in the room, as they've done it, if they've done it more than once, kind of know based on their student population and allocation and their current personnel, kind of what probably will happen. If they gain more students or if they have a need, then that's where they would share it. And then once we meet with all the principals, then we would get them an answer about the positions that they've asked for, so forth. So we're always going to have academic teachers because we have growth across the system, and you're going to want to make sure that you continue to support ratios that are out there for pupil-teacher ratio. So we have always going to see more teachers year over year. So this year's 14 academic teachers, 6 ELL. We have more EL students being served, and the state has a mandated ratio that you have to keep up with. They changed that 4 or 5 years ago, and then they've changed it again, lowering it. And so that every time they lower it, that requires you to hire more EL teachers, which are hard to find, but that's what we have to do. CTE guidance, we're always looking at ratios against guidance and then trying to figure out where we have possibly some job shares or splits where we can help the school and clean that up. So guidance counselors are added for growth and for ratio, just kind of depending on how that goes. You see the same thing with teachers, sped teachers, and teacher assistants, nurses. We're trying to remove a split right now with Liberty Creek Middle and High and Union, and then transfer and pay on reimbursement from one grant to GP. Half a safety project manager supervisor. Let me tell you what this is. As we get into more of our safety program, just one aspect of that with the Sheriff's Department and with Katie and Andy Brown, as we do things and principals say, my door doesn't work, or I've got 8 locks that don't work. We've got to have, we do a fabulous job, but I think it's important that we have someone that their sole role is to make sure that happened, right? It's not a full-time job, it's a half-time job. And we just want to make sure that that person can say, yes, this active checklist of things that principals have sent in work orders that are safety-oriented, that person's going to make sure that the follow-through happens and that we have a record of it. Does that make sense? I think that's a real wise move to make happen. And then HR staff, finance staff, actually the finance staff person probably will do a lot with budget because people ask me, when does the budget start and stop? It never stops. I mean, you're always analyzing where you're at with the budget. IT support, as our IT system grows, you know, Chris has to have help, and we've added over time. And then maintenance staff, we need another roofer out there. Mr. Lancaster, I think that question.
So this, I know this carries us from July through next June. When is White House Intermediate scheduled to open?
Next fall. White House Intermediate and Liberty Creek Middle
Okay.
will open next fall.
Which
Now,
Liberty Creek
the good
Middle-
thing, the good thing about it with the transition of those two campuses, you will have some redundant positions, but some of those have already been hired. So you've got some at Liberty Creek Middle that will physically move, but we've already taken on the recurring expense of that because they're already there, right? They'll just change physical locations. White House Intermediate, you'll have some, because you're opening a new facility and you're doing what we did last year, you'll have some redundant positions that you will need to hire because you can't split one person, right? So secretary, counselor, those kind of things. But most of the teachers will transition to White House Intermediate from other schools in the system, predominantly H.B. Williams.
Right. That was what I was.
So you won't have a lot of headwind next year as far as actual new staffing to
Administration at White House Intermediate
mainly
you've already
office
got-
administration, guidance, things that you have one of in the school where you're splitting. Those positions you will have to hire new. But it you know, sometimes people don't realize that the overwhelming vast majority of the teaching staff will move with the students,
Right.
student population. Mr. Crane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to Liberty Creek Middle, when they transition to their own building, that wing will be the freshman wing. Won't we have backfill staff, administrative, nutrition, things like that for that wing as well?
Not nutrition, but you may have some staff that are currently serving those students at the high school, like office staff, those kind of things that will have to be hired. Yeah, but it will be a very small percentage of the actual people compared to like last year when we had to staff the whole school.
I thought, don't they have their own cafeteria on that side?
They do.
But the same nutrition staff for?
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's the way it's set up. Yeah. All right. A little bit about look, this is one thing that I think we've gone over. Way back, years ago, we would give, and we still do, give allocations out on to per pupil. It's a straight run of dollars, and it was $15.30, and we worked real hard to get that up, and we've now moved all the way up to $75, and we've been there pretty consistent since 1920. These are dollars that go directly to the principal from us. We made the transition when I arrived. It was $15.30, but we didn't give them the money till December. Well, it's hard to buy stuff for the school when you don't give them the money in December. We start in August. So several years after I arrived, we made the transition, and financially we could pay the principals those dollars, or give the principals those dollars, access to those dollars earlier in the year prior to school starting, after the budget was approved. And so that's been the way it's been for many, many, many years. And of course, we've moved that dollar amount up, and $75 I think is a good number. I believe if you ask our principals, of course, I always say we take more, but at the end of the day, we've been able to relieve the burden and stress on some principal and staff to be able to pay for some of those things that when I arrived they couldn't pay for. They had to fundraise. A couple of the things that I want to make sure you knew about, and then I'll take questions. We have kept the district device fund. For those that have not been around, we started years ago allocating dollars that Chris Brown works directly with the principal, and that's how we help with technology in the school building. It's actually end user devices, and that's going to continue. We don't have a slide on it, but that will continue, and principals I think are grateful for that. It helps them plan every year so they know what they need replaced in their inventory, and they have a known source of income from us to be revenue to be able to do that. And so I wanted to mention that. And I think there was one other thing that I had written down. Let me see. Hold on just
Excuse me, is that in the blue book somewhere, that line you just mentioned?
Yeah,
Technology?
district device fund is there somewhere. I'd have to ask Amanda.
Okay,
71-100, yeah.
71-100.
Yeah, this year we kind of, it's in the back with our capital, and so if you'll look in the back capital section, let me find your page number.
It's page 32, perhaps?
Yes, that's 71-100, 722.
Yeah, I just, I know it's not in the slide, but I assume that the budget also includes the purchase of school supplies like we've done the past couple of years.
That's what I was looking for in my notes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to the pandemic, we started purchasing K through 8 school supplies. And I think that's been a big help for our parents. I think it's been great for our teachers. And we've gone through a couple of iterations of changing. We have to have Ticonderoga pencils, y'all know that, which are the most expensive, but they're the best. And we also have changed folders a couple of different times, I think, and now we're giving teachers a choice, I think, in their building about what they want. And so Jamie York's done a phenomenal job with that, and we've already gone through that process for next year with our principals. So even though those costs have gone up considerably in the last 3 years, we have planned in the budget to go ahead and purchase school supplies for the fall. So that is another recurring thing that I did not mention, thank you. Kind of like technology that we have in this budget, but I didn't specifically call it out. So thank you for doing that. Mr. King, did you get your question answered?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
That line.
Okay, all right, I was just making sure you saw it. Got it, I'm sorry.
Well, I guess one other question, I'm sorry. Would that include the Apple device
No.
purchase? Okay.
No, that line is specifically what we do year over year. The other line would be split in between two. One would be capital, right, Amanda? One would be capital.
Actually, this year, that one, it does include.
Okay.
Usually, it just includes that 750, but the iPad did go in there, but just to verify that real quick.
I think the expenditure, Amanda, part of that was with ESSER 3. A big portion of it was ESSER 3, and then the other portion was district, out of the budget that you're seeing for next year.
Yeah, so, sorry, I should have worn glasses tonight. Yeah, so 750 is for the device fund.
Say that one more time.
750,000 in the line that I told you about. 750,000 is for that recurring that we do year over year. But in that line this year, which is unusual, is 3,510,800 for the iPads. And that's separate in part from the ESSER funding, just
Yeah,
as general purpose.
The ESSER total, Scott, do you remember what the ESSER total is? On 3, 5 million?
It's about 5.8 million out of ESSER 3, 5.79, something like that. And then I believe the next, 3.5 in GP.
So that's just two different sources of funding for that one.
Yeah. And then there's another just 65,000 just for instructional supplies that are instructional equipment used throughout the district.
Okay. So just a thought on that. So, the ESSER funds are temporary. And so, we're talking about looking ahead, right? You're talking about purchasing things ahead of time. And so I don't know what the shelf life is on those iPads. I'm 3 or 4 years.
I say 3 years because the warranty's 3 years.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna have to come up with eight, almost 9 million to or
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think
Okay.
back when we had that presentation, I mentioned that.
yeah.
And I
okay.
said, you guys need to be thinking about, it's great.
I mean, I know I know we're gonna have to buy technology every couple of years. I mean, I get it. It's an expense. We're gonna
It's
have
kind
to,
of recurring.
Yeah, but so this would be, we're looking. The ESSER funds are gonna run out. I just want to.
That's right.
Right. Make that point. Okay.
Exactly, and that's the way that I mentioned it to you guys, I think, when that presentation came through, that, it's wonderful. I think many school districts have moved in that direction. I think it will be something that will enhance learning for students. It's geared to how our students function now. But I think you are correct in the sense that you need to make sure that as you're sitting here, that will be a need that will be coming towards you in 3 years if you replace all of those at one time. So you need to be mindful of that.
Well, mine kind of piggybacks off his on the one thing. So the 3.5 million, that's on it's 21,000, I think we said, devices purchased.
I don't know, Scott?
Yeah, so 21,200. So the ESSER funds will pay for all of the 912 devices for high school, plus the certified employees. So that's about you're running high school and teachers. So that'll be the first wave, and then we'll catch middle school students in the part that's in GP Capital.
Okay. But we're still, I mean, if I'm looking at it per device, we're saying after 3 years, I think we said in the presentation, we anticipate we should be able to trade them in or whatever and get about around $100 because they're $430 now. So we're looking at, it's $166 a device with the 3-year life, and we'd have roughly $100 residual on it. So, I mean, you're really looking at $22 a year for the next 3 years in the way I think of spending money. But anyway, that's on that piece. The other piece I was going to ask about while we're on the capital, last year we added a $15 million capital increase, I know, for Liberty Creek High School and Elementary for all the furniture and things like that.
Yep.
That amount did not drop.
It did not reduce. Yep,
Because
I left it in
I know
there.
we got Liberty Creek, Liberty Creek Middle and White
Yeah,
House
you got-
Intermediate.
Yep, you've got Liberty Creek Middle and White House. I did not reduce it. You have those two that will be coming online.
Right.
So there'll be some costs associated with that, furniture and some other things that you're going to need to purchase that will come out of that capital line. There's some other things that we had planned to do that are typical for us that we would normally do that are in that line. There's an allocation that is in there yearly that we've been given to the schools where they've been using that for capital. But that 15 that you're seeing that's there, it's still there, and the school district could use that for anything that you chose to use it for in the future.
And that's kind of where I'm going. If we punting over to 24 and just in the horizon, we should have money
If you
there.
If you look forward, how I would look at it as a person that's been, driving the boat. If you look at it and you say, hey, once I get past next June, we're sitting here this time next year, and you have purchased all the things that you need for the opening of White House Intermediate and White House Middle, right? And then you look at those actual costs and what is left in those dollars, Mr. Lancaster, you could move that capital money in future years to anywhere you wanted to within the budget. Does that make sense?
Right. Because I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to get that governor's number, closed up. So that's
The
what
biggest thing that you've got to figure out on I would hope that in the future you would look at you cannot pay for a recurring expense with one-time funds long. It is a bad financial move. So we are in sound financial condition. I would say as sound as this district's ever been in. But if you allocate recurring expenses out of non-recurring revenue, you will only do that for a short period of time, and then you will be in a bad situation. So I understand where you're going with that, and that's certainly a decision that can be made by the board in future years. You might also look at, hey, we're going to manage that capital line post next year, Mr. Lancaster, and we're going to allocate $2 million. We're going to restrict $2 million into technology fund. Okay, that will be restricted for 3 years from now. You will add it up, $2 million a year you set aside, and then when you get to that third year of iPads, you have addressed that issue, but you haven't done that in a financially harmful way, in my opinion.
that's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like
Yep.
how much. Like I'm not saying we're going to be able to use all 15 by any means, but we should have maybe some that we can use for salary or whatever in the future.
Yep.
If that TISA money, we don't get as much of a jump as we expect. So.
And I would say too that a little bit more clarity. We were in this last year where TISA was approved last year, right? But then it wasn't going to start for an entire full year, right? And I think that was great for the state because we were able to look at early estimates last year, which didn't change a whole lot, and they had a whole year to make sure their estimates were correct and that they were giving us good information, financial information, so we could kind of plan a year in advance. But it will give you a little bit more clarity too with what they're going to do with the base allocation for TISA. Once you get through one cycle with TISA, you'll know, Alan, how they're going to allocate future teacher raises to get to that minimum by 2026, 27. You'll know how they're going to fund that, or if they're going to fund that in addition to the base allocation.
I do. I'm right-handed. So I have a couple of questions. One, I know last year when we were doing classified raises, specifically in SPED, so Miss Dan may need to help me on this. I don't believe that we addressed all of our SPED employees last year in the range increase, that there were a group of SPED employees that were not included, with the intention that we would include them this year. And I don't know their exact titles. I believe they're within, if it's still considered resource. I feel like those names change a lot. So I think it was the resource assistants in that. Are they included in this year's range increase?
No, they're not.
Okay, so is there a reason that we did not include them? Because I feel like then that makes that gap even wider than where they were before. So they weren't included in the step last. last year,
We're including the range, not the, they're included in the
They were included in the
increase,
step, but
not
they were in the range,
Range
yes.
change, right. You know, when we looked at these positions, if you look at that sheet, a lot of that had to do with open positions and hard to fill. And so when we look across the board, if you take all of those, we can tell you how many open positions and for how long we've had those. And so we know against the market, Ms. Andrews, that we're just really struggling, kind of like we did last year with bus drivers. We made a huge jump. Not that the resource assistants don't deserve that, but we're just trying to address the most pressing need with the range change, and then have the salary change occur for everyone.
I personally would like for us to take a look at that and see if there is something that we can do for them. Again, I know in our buildings, those employees have a lot on them. And I know last year that it was hurtful for them when they were not included in the other SPED. And I think to then get another year where they are also not included again will not be good
And I think
for
one-
them. I think that is something that we need to look at and that we need to address, and we need to consider putting them into the range increases.
Sure, we'll look at it. Glad to.
Another question, sorry. For high school band, it looks like we have kept that amount per pupil, which again, I remember when it was $15 and $10 per student, and we were doing it exuberant fundraising for basic things. And so I know that, in 18-19, when we got to the amounts that we did, that was a big deal. And it's still a big deal, but I do think specifically in our arts departments, and honestly, some of this just recently was drawn to my attention, that some of those things, specifically in band, those instruments are very expensive. And so while $25 per student is a significant increase when you're looking at the cost of the instruments and so forth, it just takes a longer time to eat that elephant. So is that also something that we could look into, possibly either doing a one-time allocation to our high school band departments where we look at doing a chunk of money to be able to bring those up? I know I was told recently.
I would change how you're doing that. Okay, we're giving the schools, from the time that I arrived until now, we're placing a lot of dollars out at the principal discretion, which is the right thing to do. It's a good thing, and that's where it needs to be. But I would change a little bit about how, over time, since we've started doing that, a little bit more of how that occurs. So in the past, we would have them submit items that they would purchase to us, like the high schools, where they would want to spend $200,000. And I would probably just look at maybe how you do that, in that they would go through Dr. Langford and Miss Brown, and some of that could be restricted for band or fine arts.
I would just like to. I would like to see
I think
that
sometimes
being an increase
people,
for them.
every principal does it a little differently. But there could be situations where the arts are not really getting much of that capital, and athletics. I love both athletics and arts, but maybe athletics is getting a lot of it, maybe all of it. So you may just want to look at those dollars that are already allocated in your budget and just figure out a way that maybe you can have some influence over how those are spent out in the building.
Yeah, I just know that that's been, I've heard from specifically band parents on numerous occasions, and just, like I said,
It's very expensive.
seeing that what the cost of one instrument is, and then hearing that those instruments haven't been updated in numerous years and so forth, and just across the board. Again, it's hard when students see the investments in other parts and then go,
Yeah.
what about me?
Yeah, and I think there's multiple ways to get to that same end result.
Well, call the church because I agree with Ms. Andrews on something for a change. I absolutely agree that our SPED assistants need a significant raise. If anybody reaches out to me talking about an increase of pay, it's usually a SPED assistant. That's a very specialized position. Those are individuals that we can't, just put out a job ad. It takes a special person to do that job. You've got me scared now because we're talking about the $32.5 million in additional revenue, but we may not expect that next year. Of our current budget, what is our increase in reoccurring cost?
So it would be those dollars in the expenditure line that are going to be there forever. So
Right.
any pay raise that you're talking about
Yeah.
is going to be a recurring expense. That staffing increase and adjustments are recurring expense. I didn't go through all the expenditure changes, so Mr. Graham, let me just tell you while I go through there, okay? Utilities, internet are going to be a recurring expense.
I didn't know if you had a number already prepared.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you look at that number, that 21 million, the vast majority of it will be a recurring expense.
Okay.
Yeah. And anything like you just mentioned, you wanted to give other raises or anything like that, I mean, you would just add that to it.
Is there anything in here to pay technology teachers at our schools so our PTOs don't have to do so?
No, and we've talked about that for years. And now with where we're at with technology, and this has occurred even previously, every teacher we have is a technology teacher. I mean, we're talking about using technology as
There's a lot of bake sales that would say otherwise.
Yeah, okay. But my opinion, you've asked my opinion, and that's what I'm telling you. That if you have a teacher that's not using technology at this point, then I'm not sure they're in the system. They're probably not in the system. So I think we've come a long way. I think that would not be something I would fund if you actually ask elementary principals, if I'm going to give you one additional FTE, I'm going to give you one additional job, and I'm going to let you pick what they do, that wouldn't be it. I know, I've asked over and over and over again. So I think there's a little bit of misnomer there that would be what they would spend those dollars on if you did allocate it to them. But that's my opinion.
Well, we'll have your opinion for some time to come.
Yeah, that's right.
Real quick, I want to piggyback off what I just don't want this to be a misconception, because what I heard you say, Mr. Graham, was that we could count on this 31.4 million going forward. You're just saying the increase. Of
Yeah,
that
no,
large.
you can count on the 31 million. That's a recurring expenditure. I mean, that's a recurring revenue stream that's going to be there.
It's not going to be that much of
Right.
an increase.
No, that's right.
First of all, I want to make sure that gets cleared out. But
No, I thought that Mr. Graham was trying to understand that you have a recurring revenue stream with TISA that will always be there, and it could increase. It's not going to increase $31 million above the $199 million next year. It might increase $3 million, $4 million. So that's what I thought he was referencing. That is a recurring revenue stream that will always be there.
that was not. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that was not.
Thank you. Yeah, if I wasn't clear about that, thank you.
It got a little bit, country grammar there was a little off. I just make sure that's right. But going back to Ms. Andrews' question, we do not have and this was banned, we don't have a fine arts director from a county standpoint. Have we ever looked at that?
We've talked
For a
about it.
district our size?
We have talked about it numerous times in the past. We talked about it actually several years ago when we did that with guidance counselors and hired someone to kind of help coordinate and oversee the work of guidance counselors and support that they have. And that may be something y'all want to talk to Dr. Langford about in the past. We have had discussions in the past about it. Yeah, Dr. Langford about it, yeah.
And I just wanted to add that, we did a couple of all-county performances in fine arts, and then COVID hit, and we dropped it for a little bit. we've actually budgeted in the instruction department budget to bring back those all-county fine arts performances in elementary, middle, and high school. So there's money in the budget to support those, because obviously, like, you know, if it's all-county chorus, they need sheet music and different things like that. So there is money in the instruction department budget to help support countywide fine arts.
Well, just going to what Ms. Andrews said, I just, you know, I don't want the narrative being sent out that, hey, we're, you know, the art department is low on the totem pole in any sense of the word, because, you know,
Yeah.
I might not look like I love, you know, musicals and everything else, but I like all of our art stuff as well. I might go to every football game I can, but I like the arts as well. But I wanted, you know, and I've had a couple of people ask that question with a district as large as ours. They seem to think that we're one of the only ones.
What we've tried to do is catch it in our department in the grade bands, elementary, middle, and high school, to support from our office. And really what it is we've got some great, as you know, we've got some great fine arts teachers, and we already have these. The questions that I typically get is they're already running these programs. All they want to know is, like, how do we get T-shirts? How do we buy lunch? How do we buy sheet music? How do we get those supports? So I think now we're pretty, I mean, I would always, you know, always interested in supporting the fine arts, but I think, like, where we are right now is we have prepared more coming out of COVID and having more activities to address the needs for those fine arts programs moving forward. You know, in band, chorus, and theater. I mean, Mr. Daniels and I have talked many, many times about having a countywide musical, and we're going to, COVID got us, but we're coming back to it. We're going to get it eventually.
Or if we could get somebody to work on the scheduling so that they don't have 3 going on at the same weekend, you know, that would help me out, because I was trying to figure out how to make 3 in one weekend not too long ago. So thank you.
Mr. Graham brought me back to the expenditure page. I appreciate that, because I didn't go over some of those that are on there, past personnel. Utilities and internet, obviously, most of this, some of this was the addition that we were obviously planning for with Utilities for Liberty Creek. I'm going to tell you the biggest, I think, majority of this increased cost in water. Water costs are higher, and that's been a change. Stormwater fees that are, you know, assessed are in there, and that continues to change. Diesel gas, obviously diesel and gas, we're paying less for diesel and gas today than we were 9 months ago, but it's no different than you see when you pull up to the pump, and hopefully that will settle down a little bit. Liability building, workers' comp, obviously we added Liberty Creek, and any changes that occurs, just like changing insurance, you're adding value to it and it costs more. iPad, software and iPad, training supports, textbooks, and other supplies and services. So some of those, vast majority of those will be recurring, like I talked about with Mr. Graham. Now, diesel and gas and other things, they're going to fluctuate. Some of that utility cost, but I doubt utility cost, once you see that increase, will ever go way back down. I mean, it's going to be pretty consistent. If they add more fees or it costs more, then you'll have to address that year over year. And we have had, you know, obviously seen increases every year, some more than others.
On the textbooks and other instructional supplies, I mean, that's a $940,000 increase from last year, correct? And we did math adoption, we paid for our math books last year, so are we, I'm not.
Scott can get, yeah.
I guess I'm questioning a little bit on the, like, what are we buying there that's so much more?
Yeah, I think, and Ms. Brown, jump in if I'm misspeak, but we had always, like, historically, we funded textbooks out of, we had about a $1.55 million recurring budget line for textbooks, but then we had money that stayed over at the county in capital that we used for textbooks. So now, like last year, we moved that money back over. So we're trying to make that line more accurately reflect what we spend. In the past, I mean, obviously, like when Dr. Phillips came, and he can certainly speak to this better than me, but we had to capitalize textbooks in order to get them, and it's really not there's better ways to manage that than capitalizing textbooks. So we're trying to get that to actually reflect. And
So we're increasing our annual allocation. In other words, last year we didn't, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, last year we spent, or last
No.
year being like this month, we spent $3 or $4 million for math books.
right.
That was in last year's budget, and then we're now spending that plus $940 next
And,
year.
and you'll remember there was an amendment to move some money into textbooks this year. And it was like, I think $750,000, it was 700 some odd $1,000. And that was passed maybe last month or two. And so what happened was in the year before, that a lot of that capital, like Mr. Langford said, had been paid at the county. And so after our budget passed, we found out that that money kind of had been rolled in, was no longer separate. And so we didn't have textbook funds like we typically had at the county. So we had to come up with those funds here, and that's why you saw that amendment.
And I think the other thing you're going to see, Mr. Lancaster, is that the textbook industry's changed. Obviously, curriculum industry's changing a lot. So I think some of the things is, I think paper is going to become less a part of curriculum moving forward. So I think that there will be some shifts in costs and things like that that makes technology part of basically providing curriculum. But also there'll be some savings on the other side because we won't be buying it. I mean, like if you saw the volume of paper that Jamie moves each year, it's pretty amazing, and I think that'll start to decline.
So when is our next, is it science is our next adoption?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Textbooks. So, I'm trying to put in stuff into buckets that make sense. And so in addition to that, that's also instructional supplies. And so just like you saw the $75 per student and some other additional supplies, as our student counts increase, those dollar amounts increase also. And there's some different, there's a service in there that may need to be required for special ed. So, but it's instructional.
All right.
Yeah, I just had a question about the capital outlay. Just wanted, it's on page 32, and I'm just curious, 706, 707 on those, building construction, building improvements, we've got allocated 5.5 million. That is not, I just want to, does that include new school build, like construction costs? Or is that
No.
like just construction costs, like repairs, renovations at current schools? So
Yeah, so what line are you on? I'm sorry.
76100-706.
Yeah, it's not page 30. Okay, yeah.
Just says building construction. I'm assuming, because that is not for the new schools.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All of those all of the things that we would do in capital outlay would be projects that we're going to do on a school campus that you guys vote and approve
Yeah.
to do that expenditure. But it's not the actual expenditure of funds for the new school. Those are all done through the county with bond.
Right, okay. Last year it was about 13 million. We don't have actuals for last year. I mean, does some of that carry over that we didn't spend, or did we spend it all?
Yeah. So so anything that's in those lines that kind of Mr. Lancaster was talking about that too. Anything that's in those lines would roll forward and would be part of your fund balance.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
so it does carry over
That's
if it's
right.
not spent, okay.
That's correct.
I don't see anybody else, but one other question about transportation in regards to bus drivers. So a lot of drivers are retired. They have their own medical insurance, and so they opt out to not take the insurance. Maybe some do, I don't know, but I know some drivers will keep whatever insurance they have. Maybe it's through their spouse or whatever. And so they're not participating in that benefit. Are they getting some kind of cost adjust? Are they getting compensation to kind of offset that? Because
I do not believe, and I think we crossed this bridge years ago, I do not believe that is legal by federal law.
really, okay,
I don't believe you can compensate someone to not take your insurance.
okay. Well, I was told there are no dumb questions.
Yeah, that's right. But I do.
I was just curious. I had a driver ask me about that.
Yeah, I
and so
do
was
believe we
curious.
actually looked into that years ago. Years ago, because we were thinking the same as you. We would be better off to pay them $200 more a month and not take insurance.
Yeah.
But there's a federal law against that,
Okay.
unless it's changed recently. I don't know about it.
Okay. And then finally, just I'm looking at the first page, page 1. We've got 2023-2024 total funds budget, operating budget, $338,493,591. But it says previous year's approved budget was $316, and I'm looking at last year's budget. Last year's budget was $338 million. So what was the adjustment there?
So I'm breaking capital back out. So
Okay, so it's
last
the capital
year-
outlay. Okay, that's
It's just
I
a
actually thought that.
presentation.
Tie that 316 to the 22 on this sheet, it'll come up with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So last year, that capital was included, and
Including
this
that
year I broke the
316.
operating costs and that capital center. So if you add those two, it'll get you to that 338.
Okay, thanks.
Since he went to page 1, I've seen this twice now. What is ISM grant?
That's the grant for the funds that were sent by the governor for CTE. We broke it out
That's
so
why
you can
that's
see
all
it.
brand new.
Because it's gonna show up as a revenue and then an expenditure that's the exact same amount.
Okay.
And so we're putting it in the budget this year, but I didn't want to include it with what you typically see because it's kind of a one-time or over the next 2 years, Scott, is it? And so it just kind of convolutes your year-over-year
So what would-
expenditures and revenue.
What would happen is it would make what Mr. King just mentioned look that much more confusing. Because that money's coming in and you're gonna expend every dollar of it for what the state has approved you to do that. So it's just easier to keep it separate. All right. You finished?
I got one more question. So we may have already asked this, I don't know, but do we have any positions that we've created with ESSER funds? Because we know those are going to be going away.
Yeah, we did.
So-
We did create. We're very, very careful and have been my whole time here. When we have federal funds or grants that are approved, we're very careful to not add positions. We do. We spend the dollars, but we don't add positions that we're going to have to wind up funding. But I think when we counted the last time, we had 5 total. So it's not this huge funding issue, funding cliff. We've managed that where it's not going to be, should not be an issue. But we did go by hand and count those to make sure. Good question. I think I had that from Mr. Lancaster earlier in the year. Mr. Lancaster? Yeah.
So you're saying it's not an issue in that those 5 positions we could absorb and
Yeah,
pay,
we were
or-
probably going to add those into GP in future years.
Okay.
So we really just paid for them for a year or two early, and then they'll roll to GP. But it's not a significant impact to the budget.
Okay.